our dear guests of honor. I'd like to give the floor to Alexei Borisov, the first vice chairman of the UN Associations of Russia. Dear delegates of the Moscow International Model UN, named after Vitaly Churkin, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm glad to welcome you here at the welcome address of our model, which is gathering together for the 25th time. Now we will hear a recorded welcome address from our rector of MGIMO University, and chairman of the Russian UN Association. I would now like to give the floor to Anatoly Vasilievich Turkunov. Dear participants of the Churkin Model UN, diverse regions of the country. This year, almost 50 regions of Russia and 43 different countries are represented here, which goes to show that our model is one of the largest held in the world, and it is highly regarded. And most importantly, it attracts people who are interested, who understand the importance of the UN today and the issues it deals with on a daily basis. Moreover, this year, for the first time, all 16 of the UN committees will meet and discuss the broadest agenda of the organization. Aside from all the professional topics you will be dealing with, I think it is important that you meet and get to know each other and make friends. The Model UN movement allows you to remain friends with the people you met here your whole life, and to, of course, help each other, especially since many of you will later meet on different career tracks, as they say in the UN, in international organizations, in government, public institutions, and political organizations, as well as social movements. It is so valuable to see a person you already know, who you worked with when you were a student. This is one of the most important goals of our model. I would like to wish you every success and fruitful and interesting work here. I also hope that those who travel to Moscow will take the opportunity to see our wonderful city. I know that many of you are here for the first time, and the Model UN Secretariat, our strongest student organization, will help you with this, as they have been doing for many years. While new generations of students join the Secretariat, the traditions of professionalism and unity are preserved. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for the great work they have done to organize this 25th anniversary model. Good luck and all the best wishes. Thank you, dear Rector, dear Chairman of the Russian UN Association. He has done a lot to help the UN model movement in Russia. And our model is definitely one of the biggest in the world. All the Secretary General of the UN have welcomed our models over the 30 years of its existence. Many of our models have been visited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. This time, our model brought together more than 1,000 delegates, and as Anatoly Vasilyevich has already said, we have participants from over 56 regions of Russia and 47 countries. I'm honored to now give the floor to a friend of ours who is also MGIMO graduate, the Deputy Speaker of the Federal Council of the Russian Federation, Kosachev Konstantin Iosifovich. Dear Alexei Nikolaevich, dear Irina Evgenievna, allow me to first address you. I am deeply glad that our model is named after Vitaly Churkin, a person who dedicated his life to diplomacy, to multilateral diplomacy, to serving the United Nations, to a very important job of representing Russia abroad. I'm really glad to say that, even though he's no longer with us. Our presidium is highly professional. I'm sure that all the needed advice will be given here today from the people who, as well as Vitaly Churkin, have been working with the UN agenda their whole lives. And allow me to sidetrack from all the professional topics and to instead look at the topic we're dealing with from a slightly different perspective. All of you are familiar with the United Nations history, but this structure has been built in 1945 after the end of the Second World War, when the humanity was not used to political blocs. During that time, it felt that all the nations were equal, and leaving the legacy of World War, we will be able to communicate on the equal basis and live peacefully with one another. This is, I think, the main principle of the United Nations. It is, of course, mentioned in the articles of the Charter of the United Nations. The organization is based on the sovereign equality of all member states. This is a great principle. And like that, the United Nations existed for the duration of the Cold War, when, of course, the political struggle has been at the forefront of the history. It was a time of great rivalry. However, those blocs were able to counteract each other. They were almost equal, And in the Security Council of the United Nations, they were able to communicate and find common interests, of course, between the United States, the USSR, and all the other countries that were in their blocs. Maybe my opinion is simple, but I think that the current crisis of the United Nations, and I do believe that it is facing a crisis, I think that this crisis began at the end of the Cold War. The peak was at the end of the Second World War, and the end was at the end of the Cold War. That was the time where agenda was dominated by only one group of countries, which undermined the principle of equality, of sovereign equality. Its principle was almost forgotten. We can discuss the reasons for this, and we can discuss the different approaches to this situation. But I know that Russia has always worked to make the UN the main force in the international relations, but we are dealing with the situation that has happened. Now I see that some countries are leaving this state of crisis. And I think that the lowest point of the political crisis is already behind us. I'd like to remind you of George Orwell's Animal Farm. He worked that novel during the World War II, even before the existence of the United Nations. He criticized the Stalin's USSR. So in his novel, he criticized the Soviet Union quite extensively. But ironically, that novel was published on 17th of August in 1945, right between the signing of the Charter of the United Nations and the day of the United Nations when that charter took force. The countries that have dominated the political agenda after the Cold War are always emphasizing the rules-based order that is supposed to follow our current situation. When I was rereading The Animal Farm, I realized certain similarities. There was 7 main rules when the pigs took over the farm. They created 7 main rules, just like in the United Nations Charter. And later, without much notice, other rules and other principles were written into the rules. The 7th rule was at the beginning that all animals were made equal, but some were made more equal than others. In the 6th rule, the 6th rule first said that an animal should not kill any other animal, but then in the brackets they wrote without a reason. So that meant that when there was a reason, an animal could kill an animal. George Orwell foresaw our future and how some countries are trying to rewrite the rule book. Their rules are not written, they're not known. We see it time and time again. We see it in the Middle East. We've seen it over the last 24 hours when the Western world kept silent about the Israeli strikes and is now pushing Iran to stop its military activity. But the most striking example is, of course, the history of Minsk treaties and Minsk agreements. The West wasn't able to convince Ukraine to follow them, even though there was a resolution of the Security Council of the United Nations. That being said, I'd like to give my opinion on why the rise of the West after the Cold War was so easy and how they were able to dominate the political sphere. The answer is that those group of Western countries has been creating and institutionalizing unipolar political domination. The group of 7 is evidence of that. And there are many examples, including the International Olympic Committee, certain prestigious awards, it's hard to imagine. It's not hard to imagine that if Assange was sharing Russia's secret, he would obviously be given a Nobel Peace Prize. But we see the situation as it is. When the institution is being pushed, the decision that is being made is the one that is beneficial to only one group of nations. This situation is highly despicable. We need to institutionalize a multipolar world. And we should start with reforming the United Nations, with the Security Council. I am sure that those institutions need reforms. I'm sure that those topics will be discussed here during the week of the Model UN. We need to discuss what shall come after the dollar. We shall discuss how to organize the work of the Olympic movements. There are many questions to be discussed. We need to replace unipolarity with multilateralism. And I'm sure that during the week of our model, those topics will be revisited. I invite you to find solutions to ponder those questions. I wish you good luck. Thank you. Sorry, I unfortunately have to be ready for a meeting that I can't miss. So unfortunately, I have to leave you at this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Konstantin Iosifovich. Thank you for speaking about the issues that inspire our delegates to work and to discuss the agenda, to discuss how can we make the organization work better. As you know, our wonderful capital, Moscow, and this year, Moscow, the mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, decided to support the model movement, both financially, and I'm very pleased to now give the floor to Kuznetsov Vladimir Valerievich, who is also a MGIMO student. Thank you very much, Alexey Nikolaevich. Dear Irina Evgenievna, dear friends, my professors, my colleagues, I see many familiar faces in the hall, dear students who will take part in the work of the conference of the Model UN. I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of the government of Moscow. It is a great honor for us to support our dear university and the initiatives that it implements every year. If we talk about the UN, Konstantin Iosifovich has already given us historical background. I won't repeat that, but UN is a wonderful international platform. It is a result of evolution of international relations, which has led to the creation of an amazing platform for discussions. All countries, despite of their economic power and political regime, have the right to express their opinion. They discuss the problems of global development, economic development, sustainability, climate changes, fighting against poverty and hunger, fight against terrorism and racism. And when the UN was created on the 24th of October 1945, 51 states participated in the creation of the organization. Then, after the end of the Second World War, the most destructive war throughout our history that killed many lives and destructed many states, we could think that the world changed, that there will be a global government that will define the main trends of the development, will fight with inequality and hunger, with the injustice, will fight for the human rights, for the rights of small countries. The founders of the organization the United Nations was created, and for many years it has been a unique platform to openly discuss any problems. It is no doubt an achievement of humanity. It is some kind of parliament of nations, and now many countries and regions, including Moscow, follow the Sustainable Development Goals that were defined by the UN as the main goal for the development of humanity. It is a crucial factor nowadays. In each program that is adopted by the Moscow government, the principles are taken into account, that 17 principles are taken into account that were created in 2017, and now today we can proudly say that Moscow has achieved 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals and continue to implement the other. We actively cooperate with different UN agencies, with the habitats, and Moscow has been one of the initiators of the pilot program of the economic program of economic development, and now we can say that Moscow has taken into account international programs, and due to this Moscow has achieved great results, and Habitat awarded Moscow with the first prize in the world from the point of view of the development of urban infrastructure, comfortable life. It is very valuable and precious result for us, and the highest rating, because 50 large cities were assessed and 29 were chosen as leading cities. Among them, there were such famous and developed cities as London, Madrid, Singapore, Paris, and other cities on various continents, and Moscow became the first. It is a great honor for us, and we will try to keep these results. And I would like to express gratitude to the UN Association of Russia, because it motivates us to take part in various events that are organized by the UN. Soon we will take part in the Forum of Cities in Cairo that will be organized by the UN. Several weeks ago, we participated in meetings of Escada Unido and Habitat in Bangkok. These negotiations were very fruitful and useful. We achieved results there, and we will keep on cooperating with the UN. Alexei Nikolaevich reminded my experience of participation in the UN model. It was in 1982-88, during the times of the USSR, when for the first time the MGIMO delegation visited a capitalist country, Luxembourg, and we had the honor to take part in that amazing conference. Then we thought that it was some kind of a game, and one of the topics that was discussed was time of the assault of one of the country of the Middle East on the other country. Imagine, in 1988 we discussed what happened exactly 2 days ago. Amazing events. I would like to call you on to be creative, to be able to listen to each other, to work in committees, trying to find solutions in order to implement the goals such as equality, peace, fight with the hunger and poverty and other problems that we are facing constantly, so that these issues will be solved, because you will need that in future, as my experience was extremely valuable for me, and my experience helps me a lot. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Moscow government, would like to invite everyone who is interested in international affairs to consider the opportunity of working in the government of Moscow in our department. Good luck. Thank you very much, Sergei Evgenievich. I can reaffirm that we work actively with the Moscow government, and we held events in the UN headquarters in New York and the meetings with the Secretary General, and we witnessed that Moscow is a great megapolis, and we can see how it coped with the challenges such as the COVID pandemics, and we are happy that we are in Moscow, that Moscow hosts our model. And I invite those who came for the model from different countries to get to know Moscow better. Thank you very much for support. And now I shall give the floor to another friend of MGIMO, the director of the Department of International Organizations of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, who was ambassador of the Russian Federation in the UN, Ilyachov Pyotr Viktorovich. Thank you, Alexey Nikolaevich. Dear Irina Evgenievna, dear Secretary General, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome the participants of the 25th Churkin Moscow International Model UN, named after distinguished diplomat Churkin. We've talked a lot about him today, but I would like to say that the most part of their career he developed for almost 11 years. He worked in New York without any stops, 24 hours he worked. He took part in developing solutions in this Security Council and in promoting Russian interests. He witnessed a lot of crises that are permanent crises in the Middle East and in Africa. And I would say that two of the most bright crises are the assault of Georgia on Abkhazia and Yuzhny Ossetia in 2008, and February 2014, when the world saw the anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine, and now we suffer the consequences of these events. Dear colleagues, during this event, this week, you will implement and practice your knowledge, not only practical, but also your knowledge of rhetoric, and from a different perspective, you will learn how to present the stance of the country that you present. But in the UN, you have to think in advance, like in chess game, because your opponent can propose a completely different thing. The UN was created as a part of bipolar system, but we can say as a part of a multilateral system. And now its role as a part of this system is increasing, and you know that with the new concept of foreign policy adopted last year, a lot of attention is paid to the role of the UN. I quote, "One of the priorities of the Russian Federation remains to maintain the role of UN in the maintaining peace and principles of the UN Charter." When we speak about OON, we speak about implementing all the principles mentioned in the UN Charter. instead of the concept that is imposed by the Western countries about the rule-based order. Of course, West doesn't want to lose its dominant position in the world that it has had during many years. Nobody knows what rules we will have today or tomorrow. We have a good proverb in Russia that you never know what will happen in the future. Secretary Blinken said that the conference that Switzerland organizes on Ukraine, Russia will be whether one of the guests, but they doesn't want Russia to participate directly in this conference. As I mentioned before, an interesting week is awaiting for you. Please concentrate on the problems that you will be dealing with, but don't forget that the UN Charter, despite the fact that it was created 18 years ago, despite some amendments of 1963 when the Security Council was expanded, despite this, the UN Charter says nothing about the peacekeeping, and many crises have been resolved due to the efforts of peacekeeping in such countries as Sierra Leone. The UN Charter says nothing about the fight against terrorism, but we have achieved great results in this field, and it demonstrates that UN was and remains a collective organ where we are trying to find a common approach to fighting the global problems, and these collective solutions are still relevant through times and remain sustainable and are implemented. One of the examples is our fight against COVID pandemics and its consequences. We haven't overcome them completely, but putting aside ideological differences, we managed within the framework of the world community to unite efforts to fight the pandemics. Before it, we had the Ebola in Western Africa, and again, due to collective efforts, we managed to eradicate it, and the consequences for the global economy were not so devastating. In conclusion, I would like to wish to all the participants of the model all the success, to make new friends. Don't be afraid to be creative and to propose new ideas, because your ideas, and try to make sure they conform the UN Charter that remains our compass in the achieving of those goals that the UN has. Thank you very much.
For their productive work and for their support of the Model UN movement. Many graduates of MGIMO then join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please share our words of gratitude with them. I'm glad to give the floor to the head of the UN Information Center in Moscow, Vladimir Kuznetsov. We work together with their organizations ever since its founding. The UN Information Center in Moscow was created in 1998, and we have created many projects together since then. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Dear Alexey Nikolaevich, dear Irina Evgenievna, dear Sergei Evgenievich, Pyotr Viktorovich, dear Secretary General, I am glad to welcome the administration, the guests and delegates of the Moscow International Model UN, the Secretariat. The name of Vitaly Churkin means a lot to all of us who worked for the UN. And the current Secretary General of the United Nations emphasized the qualities of Vitaly Churkin and the dedication he showed to the work of the organization. He's a
Повторять, что легендарный МГИМО университет – это многолетний партнер Российского информационного центра, всей системы Всемирной организации, которая работает в России, в этой кузнице отечественной дипломатии работают блестящие ученые,
foundation of, it is one of the main partners of the UN in Russia is the Russian UN association that works hand with hand. It is hard to underestimate the role of Anatoly Vasilyevich Turkunov because due to his efforts, MGIMO is one of the leading universities of Russia and worldwide. For me, it is extremely important that the traditions of MGIMO, we are proud of our cooperation that you can see in the education, because many students of MGIMO practice in the UN Information Center in Moscow.
здравого смысла и ума, чтобы
in order to prevent it. The situation that we have now is often compared with the Caribbean crisis that was a huge crisis that could provoke the Third World War. But all the parties showed wisdom and we were able to prevent this enormous crisis. The conflict in the Middle East is a very urgent issue. The problem is not only in the situation in the Gaza, because the humanitarian situation there is awful. What consequences will it bring for the upcoming generations? It is hard to predict that. Despite the situation in Gaza, there are risks that the conflict will expand to the regional conflict or even escalate to global scales. What happens on the border of Israel and Libya is very dangerous because this region is known for a lot of conflicts. The UN has never had an easy life.
Когда рассказывают о том, что раньше все было хорошо, и мы могли принимать решения, а сейчас все изменилось, и он стал недееспособный, но это не совсем так, потому что есть статистику резолюций, которые были заветированы в Совете Безопасности ООН в первые послевоенные годы.
If you look at how many resolutions have been passed in the United Nations, it proves my point. In the 1960s, when the Secretary General was under immense pressure with the changes that countries have been trying to propose to peacekeeping, all of this shows the same situation. We always had our differences. We had them in the Security Council, but it has always been important to balance our interests, even when it comes to the Middle East crisis. Now the geopolitical situation is changing. New centers of power are emerging, and our differences are being accentuated. This is not going anywhere, and the UN, of course, represents all of the differences we have between us, but nothing can replace the United Nations. This is an organization that gathers together almost all of the states of the world, and it is extremely important. Dear colleagues, currently the Pact for the Future is being discussed, which is supposed to be agreed on with the Forum of the Future. The future is seen differently by different countries, but this forum is an opportunity to improve our ties, to improve global government, and support the Sustainable Development Goals. The articles of the Charter, with all of their comprehensibility and importance, to make strides towards a global system that will positively impact the lives of people, to improve the world financial system, which should represent the interests of the global South. One of the most important topics to be discussed is the roles of the young generation. And of course, the climate change agenda and technology agenda. Currently, the positions of the country are being devised, discussions are being held to prepare the thesis and the agendas that countries will deliver. As far as I know, MGIMO is taking a great part in this collective work. Dear delegates, I hope that you will be able to find common ground with your colleagues, with different people and different groups of interests. You want to develop such qualities as respect and understanding, and this model is a great foundation for your future work. This is an extremely important work you're doing here. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir Valeryevich, for your kind words of wisdom for delegates. We hope to continue our fruitful work with the UN Information Center. I'm extremely glad to give the floor to the wife of Vitaly Churkin, to Irina Evgenievna. In 2017, we decided, as well with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, and with the chairman of the Russian UN Association, to name our model after Vitaly Churkin, a distinguished diplomat and permanent representative of Russia to the United Nations. We worked together for many years, and he was always supportive of the delegates of our model of the United Nations, of all the students who took part in it over the years. He was a true friend of our association and of our model. Last Friday, we opened a monument in his honor. Irina Evgenievna was there to support us, and I'm really thankful for that. Irina Evgenievna, I give the floor to you. I'm extremely grateful for all the kind words about Vitaly Churkin. Dear participants of the Moscow International Model UN, our wonderful university, I'm happy to welcome you here today. I'm happy to say that our meetings are becoming regular. I'm here in front of you as the wife of Vitaly Churkin, and I prefer that word to the other one that can be used here. I had the privilege of spending 40 years with him. On the 12th of April, last Friday, a monument was opened in his honor. It is a great monument, worthy of a very special person. And once again, Anatoly Vasilyevich, I thank you for that. 12th of April is the day of the sphere, this space here in Russia. And we are all proud of that. That celebration also coincided with my personal family tradition that I'd like to tell you about. On 12th of April, almost 50 years ago, Vitaly Churkin proposed to me. It was a beautiful scene. It was here in Moscow. I was young and I was a student, and he was visiting me from negotiations. He proposed to me, and of course I said yes. Those who know him, and you know him at least by photos, my decision was loud and clear at that moment. Something was missing then. And right at that time, fireworks were seen in Moscow. That was a true celebration. That was a happy memory. This model, bearing the name of Vitaly Churkin, is a great thing. He was a defender of the main role of the United Nations, and he always defended the principles of the organization. He always thought that everything can be changed and our differences can be bridged, but we should never revise the principles of the organizations that were created after the World War II. He wrote, "Our world is built this way. National ways of solving problems are often quite different, and it is a normal thing. The most important thing is we have the United Nations, and its role is to harmonize our separate interests and find effective ways to solve problems and balance our interests. I wish you fruitful and productive works here. I wish you making new friends. You will make great friends here. I hope that you will find answers to the questions that plague you right now. Good luck." Irina Evgenievna, thank you very much for your kind and sincere words to our delegates. You have a special day here. Over this Model Week, please, dear delegates, be respectful of each other, but also make your ideas clear, make your ideas known. This is the essence of the Model UN movement. It doesn't matter what career you choose, what path in life, those qualities will always be important. The level of professionalism of Vitaly Churkin was always emphasized by all his colleagues. That's why we are proud to bear his name. Those qualities we should all learn from him. Now, we will hear an address to the Secretary General of Moscow International Model UN of 2024, Daniil Chinip.
Thank you, Alexei Nikolaevich. Dear participants of the Churkin Moscow International Model UN, dear members of the Presidium and distinguished guests, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the leadership of our university, Association of the United Nations of Russia, and MGIMO Department of Diplomacy of our university, Irina Evgenievna, and our guests for continuous support of our model. Dear Anatoly Vasilievich, Alexei Nikolaevich, Kirill Mikhailovich, on behalf of the entire Model Secretariat, let me extend gratitude for your contribution to the development of the Model movement in Russia. Today, here in front of you, let me extend a huge gratitude to my dear Secretariat team, who has worked hard for the whole year to ensure that the 25th anniversary model of the UN was held at the highest level. This year we have become a team that every manager could only dream of. We understand each other, sometimes even without words. It is due to the Secretariat team that our model brought together 1,093 participants from more than 40 countries around the world. It allowed more than 120 participants from Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia to become a part of the incredible model community. Our team has been putting a heart and soul so that today MGIMO opens its door for the brightest, most talented, and most intelligent representatives of the young generation. We have done everything possible to make sure that this model was the most important event of the spring for you, dear participants of the model. I am deeply grateful that I have the honor to preside over the anniversary model. It was a long journey where there were some difficulties, but together with the incredible people of our Secretariat, we were able to cope with all the difficulties and hope that this and upcoming model days will become the most memorable for you, and we will do everything possible for this. We believe that each of the participants this year will be able to feel all the warmth of our hearts and learn from their own experience what it means to be a part of the model movement. Churkin Model UN always remains a place where each of you, distinguished delegates, guests, and members, can feel completely comfortable. It is during the Model Week that all of us, citizens of different states, and representatives of various universities and schools become a great family bounded not by sincere and long-term friendship, by mutual respect and the ability not only to listen to each other but also hear each other. Dear friends, an unforgettable week is awaiting for you. No doubt it will remain in your memory for years and will warm your hearts even on the coldest evenings. The Churkin Model UN is not just a conference, but a place where you want to return. And I'm pleased to see that here in the hall I can see not only experienced participants of the models, but also my close friends with whom I met due to the model. Our model is a place that you don't want to leave even after many years. It is a place where each of the participants will find a sense of oneself. Now in the hall you are sitting next to people who will become your friends in this week, and this friendship will last for many years, because nothing brings together better than our model. In one model week, each of you will go through a long journey and leave our university in a completely different status. The secretariat team, which I love indefinitely, let's do everything to make the eyes of delegates spark as bright as ours. Now I'm very proud to announce the 25th anniversary Moscow International Model of the UN named after Churkin Open.